Come on, JavaScript, why are you messing with me? Why are there so many JavaScript module system? Why is there not just one single JavaScript module system? Why do we have CommonJS? Why do we have ESM? Maybe it's also happened to you where you faced an issue while coding or developing and fetching some dependency, and suddenly your application crashes and you don't know really why. And one of the reasons could be because you are fetching an ESM only package in your CommonJS application, or your CommonJS or your tool, which is written with CommonJS, does not work anymore. So there's a bit of strange behavior which happened to me lately. So that's why I would like to talk with you about what's happened to me and why do we have so many different JavaScript module systems. So, who am I? My name is John. I was born and raised in Berlin. I'm currently a full stack engineer specializing on web technologies, cloud, and I do development stuff on the back end and the front end, like the typical front end developer. But I'm also doing like infrastructure as code, like also a bit of DevOps, like setting up CI/CD pipeline, and also setting up cloud infrastructure. I'm a football romantic, so I love watching football. And if I'm not in Berlin, I'm probably traveling somewhere. So what's happened? Well, I'm a freelancer, and I work for a client, and they usually have once a quarter their patch day where they update their packages. So they have like various repositories, and of course they want to keep them up to date. So usually what we do is we run npm upgrade. So that will ensure that we upgrade the packages. We don't change any code, so the code base stays as it is. But yeah, like I said, we update the packages. And then one day, when we were running, after upgrading the packages, npm test, so as you can see, many things went green. Yeah, it takes a while to test and upgrade. But out of the sudden, out of the blue, something weird happened. We encountered 7 failed tests. And as you can see here, the pointer is saying actually import or syntax error, unexpected token export, but the pointer is actually pointing to import from date form. A bit of a background, we did everything in Typescript, also our jest file, so we use jest for unit testing. Also our test files are written in Typescript, so for that we use TS-jest. And this package date format we use to format date from to German date format. And after upgrading the package, we got this error message. Like I said, no change in the code, but still getting this error. So if we scroll up a bit to the error, it says test suite failed to run. Just encountered an unexpected token. Again, it was pointing here, import, but unexpected token export. So that was an unexpected token for jest. Well, jest, if we reading on, jest failed to pass a file. This happens, for example, when your code or dependencies use non-standard JavaScript syntax, or when jest is not configured to support such syntax. Out of the box, it supports Babel, and it ignores the Node modules folder. So then there are some points listed here. We can simply ignore the last one. if you're trying to use TypeScript, there is also documentation for using TypeScript with Jest. As I said, we use ts-jest to also write our test file with TypeScript. So that means only the first point. Oh, let's have a closer look at the first point. If you're trying to use ECMAScript module, see this page. So this is already interesting because if you're trying to use ECMAScript modules or ESM, then have a look here. So I opened that page and it says just ships with experimental support for ECMAScript modules, ESM. So what's happened? So what can you do about it? So you can actually run a flag using the experimental via module. For example, use node and then the flag experiment via modules, pointing to the node modules folder inside the bin folder or inside the jest package inside the bin folder, and then take the jest binary or JavaScript in this case, and this should work. I tested it and it works, but this is somehow not ideal because we also need to rewrite some script or package. It could be easy, but yeah, we were wondering, why do we have to do that? Why does it not understand ESM? So to answer this question, we were asking, what is actually ESM? And for that, we need to answer the question, why do we need a JavaScript module system at all? Okay, let's go back in time where we had. So I grew up with the LAMP stack, where I was using PHP for my server script, and I used JavaScript, or actually jQuery back then, for DOM manipulation. So, but since until now, the JavaScript world evolved, and now we have also JavaScript running on the server. So actually, we could do anything with JavaScript. That leads to a larger code base. Yes. So instead of dumping everything in one file, we also want to have something similar what other runtimes have. For example, Python, where we can outsource some functionalities in their modules and so on, so that we also structure and organize our code base. So we can, it is made for code splitting. And this code, after we split it, we can share and reuse. So that's why we need to have a JavaScript module system. Other runtimes, such as Python, even Java, are doing it as well. And for that, after NodeJS was invented, there was one JavaScript module system called CommonJS. It was established in 2009 under the name Server.js, and it is a standard that established convention for JavaScript module. It's supposed to work on the server side. So again, Node.js came out, and we needed a JavaScript module system, and that was at that time CommonJS. The syntax is quite familiar. So we have this require function where we load the modules in, and the export syntax to export modules. And everything is loaded synchronously. So every module will be loaded one by one. But why do we need ESM? So what is actually ESM? So ESM was established in 2015. Okay, there were some proposals before, and ECMAScript already existed. ECMAScript is like a standard for JavaScript to write some sugar syntax like await async or error function and so on. This is all ECMAScript. And it was actually a standard for the browser. So actually the ECMAScript community was thinking, okay, hey, we need also a JavaScript module for the browser. So that's two different things. So one, the CommonJS was for the server and the ESM was for the browser, yeah, or for the client. We also need the possibility to fetch data over the network via the file system. And again, it should work on the client first, but now Node.js and all the runtimes like Dino and Bun, they also support ESM. The syntax is you use the import syntax from the package, and if you want to export a module, then you use the export const or export default syntax, and it's loaded asynchronously, so it does not wait until the other until each package is loaded. But now you may say, okay, well, now you may say, okay, there's a bunch of CommonJS packages out there. So let's open up this tweet. And this tweet actually says, okay, so from last year, by the end of May 2023, there was like more than 70% CommonJS only, and above than 10% ESM only. 6% were dual, and 12 or 13% were like, I don't know, rubbish. They don't have dual support. So it is a huge number. It is a huge gap. So 70% are CommonJS only, whereas only 10% are ESM only. But as you can see, the trend is actually evolving. So CommonJS only packages are getting smaller, and ESM only packages getting bigger. So there's a trend. See, you can see a trend here. But okay, let's talk about the differences. So let's talk about performance. So on the left side we have CommonJS, on the right side we have ESM. And as you can see, I use a package which supports both, like CommonJS and ESM. And I use the AWS SDK S3 client to demonstrate the performance here. So on the left side, we load everything from the module and save it in the S3 variable by using the require syntax. And then we can load the class S3 client. And this is how we initiate a client with the AWS SDK. On the right side, we import the S3 client directly from the AWS S3 client. So as you can see, we see some curly braces around the S3 client, which means we only take the client, we take out the client directly from the module, and then we can initiate it directly without saving it in an S3 file, S3 variable, like on the left side. And then I did some benchmarking. I got inspired by Jared Sumner, the founder of Bun, who did in his blog post the same. Basically, I have one file for CommonJS. So the file extension CJS means it's a CommonJS file, and the file extension MJS is an ESM file. I named it S3 get files with the respective file extension, and then I was running Node. And the result is that CommonJS is actually faster than ESM. Wait, what? Why should we then not use CommonJS directly? Why should we do something like ESM if CommonJS is faster than ESM? That was actually also my question. But here's the thing. So whenever you ship something to production, you don't ship just the thing of file, because in this case, you would also ship not just the thing of file, but also the modules, right? So in NPM or in Node.js context, you would also need to ship the Node modules folder, which you usually don't do. So you do something like you bundle everything into a single file. So this is what you usually do when you productionize something. So you put everything into one file. And I use ESBuild for that. And again, so we have our CommonJS file and our ESM file, and I bundle the file now. So in ESBuild, you can define the output format. In this case, it's a CommonJS. I want to have a CommonJS output on the left side, and here on the right side an ESM file. I named it like exactly the same with the correct file extension. I said I want to target my Node.js server. So in this case, I target Node. And then the main fields, that's a bit weird for ESM because in ESBuild, it always looks for the main file first. So inside the package.json, you can define the keyword main, which points usually to your main file. But you can also now, if you support dual packages or dual module systems, you can also put a module in there and then exports and point to different files. So usually in ESBuild, it looks into the main keyword inside the package.json first, and then the module. So in our case here, I had to say, okay, I want to look into the modules keyword first, look what files are defined in there. So, and as you can see, the result is like there's a huge gap. So the CommonJS bundle is much, much bigger than the ESM bundle. So ESM is almost half of the size. It took a bit longer, okay, I think because it needs to validate what needs to be in the bundle. So that's why whenever you have something, whenever you create a library or need to bundle something, I would recommend you to use something like this, because this is a destructor method. With that, you say, okay, I only want to have the F3 client. The rest I don't care yet. And if in the client, in the class, of course, methods which are defined outside of this class, then it's also be part of the bundle. But usually the rest, which is not used, are ignored. Whereas here, everything is put into the bundle. So that's why destructor is good. I know it can look ugly or can be quite annoying, but if you know, okay, I only want this part of the module, of the package, then go for the destructor method. And then I run the test again with a different result this time. And this time the ESM module ran faster than the CommonJS. It ran even faster than the unbundled CommonJS file. So what I wanted to say is you should aim for ESM, because ESM in the end, it's bundling much faster. No, it's bundling to a much smaller file size, and smaller file size is always better than bigger. So that's why it's also went faster in the end. But now you can say, I don't care, I use TypeScript. But TypeScript in the end is just a fancy linter, it's a compiler. It does not change. So you can actually also use CommonJS syntax in your TypeScript file, but nobody does that. Or is any one of you doing it? I don't know. So what I wanted to say and to bring as a statement is ESM is the future. When you bundle the code, then ESM results into smaller packages, but only if the package is also an ESM package or supports ESM, then the bundle usually is smaller, and thus it's faster than CommonJS, because CommonJS loads all the dependencies, even though it's not used, everything from the dependency into it's a single file. ESM is doing something like, they call it tree shaking, so really shaking on the tree, and only the stuff they need comes down from the tree, and thus it's a smaller bundle. ESM works now on the client and on the server, and it is supported by all the runtimes, so like Node.js, Bun, or Dino. TypeScript, if you get started with TypeScript, all the syntax is subconsciously using, or all the syntax is written in ESM. So you're subconsciously supporting ESM syntax. And if your code breaks, then maybe there's legacy. Maybe you should reconsider using a different library which supports ESM, or maybe you should get rid of CommonJS only packages. So for example, Jest, we should or could change it with vtest. The good thing about vtest is the syntax stays. It's only the import. Some import statements are different, but usually it's a syntax or how you think about testing in JavaScript is similar to Jest. Or if you use Express, for example, maybe it's time for using something much more faster, like E3 from NodeJS. So yeah, you should rethink your code base if it breaks. Yes, there's still 70%, over 70% using CommonJS, but you saw the trend. The trend is getting smaller, so there are less CommonJS, but more ESM-only packages. And also, the question is, how many of the CommonJS packages are actively maintained? Now you can argue, well, I want to keep my CommonJS, so I cannot use ESM in there. Yes, you cannot use ESM inside CommonJS. But again, each browser supports ESM. Each server runtime supports ESM. So again, if you have CommonJS or if you use CommonJS, maybe you need to rethink, because maybe you're using legacy. And I also saw that, okay, you write your code in ESM, but then you use Babel to convert it to CommonJS due to browser support, you may argue. But there I say, okay, like I said, each browser nowadays supports ESM. And I did my research since 2017. the browser, all the browsers, all the major browsers are supporting ESM. If you're reaching out for Internet Explorer, please don't. If your browser does not understand ESM, then you should upgrade your browser, because I'm pretty sure all the browsers will understand ESM. So what do I mean by that actually? So let's consider, so I have my project here, I have a bunch of files. So what do I mean with browser support? So let's create a test HTML. So in the past we had something like script, and then we used something from the CDN, right? So we had the HTTPS, and then we had CDN, and then jQuery.com. I know it's not the correct URL, and then we could finally use something like the $sign. So let's create a div, and then we could do something like jQuery document ready, and then console, something like that. Okay, but with ESM module, now we are able to, or the problem here is we cannot access like the file which are locally in the past. Now with ESM, we can now do it. We can actually also say, okay, I have my date format JS, so I can actually point to my date format, or actually I can go in my Node modules folder, because in the end the Node modules folder contains the date format, and I'm using this external library because ESM is not running on the server. Because we are not running on the server, we have to use a path here. So we have to go, okay, Node modules, we go to Node modules, we go to date format, we go to lib, and we need to define the file explicitly. So we cannot say something like this and then hoping it goes into, it picks the right file. So because we are not running on the runtime, we are running on the browser again. So that's why we have to be explicit and mention the file extension here. And then well, actually, this is not correct here. Actually, we have to do something like this. And then we can use date format. So we don't need to use this script, this syntax, but can use it directly. But can import it. And we can say something like document get element by ID, blah, 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 and an inner HTML, and then format our date. So let's run this. Okay, as you can see, we see nothing because there's something missing. So it says cannot use import statement outside a module, because we need to tell JavaScript, hey, this is actually a module. This is actually ESM. So we need to define the type here. We have to say like type module, and voila, we successfully imported an external module in our browser. So now we can pick up a date. So as you can see, it changes. Oh. let's remove the times, and then, yeah. So it's now not necessary to convert back to CommonJS because the browser now supports it, as I said, since 2017. And Node supported since Node 14, and we are already on, or the LTS is already on 20. You may say, okay, the async await will remove the static analyzer benefit, but in the end, who cares? So what I wanted to give you or tell you, please avoid the mess and embrace ESM. Don't or ditch CommonJS and start an ESM only package. If you're doing dual, you are not really helping because then legacy will be still out there. But I think, or I believe, if we're starting ESM only, people will rethink, okay, maybe that's the future. We should ditch CommonJS. And that's all I have. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. You can follow me on all the social. I'm sometimes blogging on Medium, DevTO, or Hashnode. And yeah, would be happy if you give me a follow. Thanks so much. Take care.